the screen? Can someone give me a thumbs up that they can see the screen? Yeah, excellent, wonderful. So this one is about progressing or moving on from calling bob doubles, which you did last month, into calling bob minor. And I'm going to, why is it not moving on? I had this trouble last time, didn't I? I couldn't. Does anyone know what the best way to move on? Page down doesn't seem to be working. I'll just do it that way. There you go. There. So sorry about that. No. Right. What I want to try and cover is basically, where do we actually start with the whole sort of calling of bobs and singles, and I want to try and draw some of the parallels between what you would do when you're calling bob doubles and what you were doing, what you would do if you were calling bob minor, because there are some parallels. And I also want to start to introduce you to some of the lingo and written notation, because in ringing it's a real thing, isn't it, for complicated lingo, and it's like, what on earth does that mean? And actually, when you start to call at bob minor level and upwards, you do start to have to know some new language and new ways of looking at some of the written notation and things like that. So I want to try and introduce those, and also I'm going to hopefully give you something to walk away with in terms of simple touches that you'll be able to sort of call, I'm hoping, later. So I just want to do, first of all, why is it doing? Now I'm not doing anything there and it's going on and on and on. Why is it doing that? Stop. So I want to go, and I don't know if people saw me with my hands up, not actually doing anything there. Let's see if that makes a difference. Okay. So I'm going to assume that everyone can ring bob minor, and I'm going to assume also that people know what happens at a bob and a single. I'm not going to go as far in this presentation, in this training session, to looking at sort of coursing orders or anything like that. So this is very much about shoving the bobs in as opposed to conducting. So I'm not going anywhere near near coursing orders. I'm just really going to be sticking with some bobs, and of course singles, which we need to be able to learn to do in bob minor. So if we have a little recap of what happens in a bob, which is clearly the one on the left hand side. I am really having difficulty with my screen here, Ed. I'm so sorry about this. Where has it gone? Right, I'm going to do it this way. So on the left hand side, this is a bob. So let's just have a notice of what's going on in a bob in bob minor. So what we first of all notice is that quite a lot of what's happening is exactly the same as bob doubles. There's a bell running out, which is the green one. So that runs out. It was going to make seconds, but instead it runs out and it picks up the work of the third. It becomes thirds place bell, and it picks up that work. So it runs out, runs in, makes seconds next time. And a bob in, if you were going to do the blue line, if the blue one here, if you were going to do 3/4 down, if the bob called, you run in, pick up the work of the second. So you lead, you go out to the back, and you do 3/4 down next time. And then the pink one makes fourths, or makes the bob. So lo and behold, it's the same work, isn't it? And 3 bells are affected, just like as it happens in bob doubles. And what happens is there are then the 2 bells that are left behind, they are unaffected. And they carry on doing the 5/6 dodge that they were going to do, whether that's down or up. They carry on doing that unaffected. And it's similar, isn't it, to bob doubles, where there was a bell at the back, the one that was left over, that was also unaffected when we put a bob in bob doubles. The other thing to remember is that the call goes in exactly the same place. It goes in when the treble is in seconds place and it's about to lead, and all the stuff that we talked about don't leave it too late, in the row, try and do it as the treble's going into seconds place. All of that still applies, and indeed all of that will apply actually in any call that you make in the future. So the call happens in the same place. And then if we look at a single, we notice that only 2 bells are affected. So the pink one does the same work as if it were in a bob. It makes fourths and picks up the work of fourth place bell. So it goes down to lead, up to the back, and dodges in 5/6 at the back next time. The blue one does something different, doesn't it? It makes the single, or it makes thirds. So rather than dodging 3/4 down, it stays in thirds place, picks up the work of the third, which is thirds place bell, goes out to the back, lies behind, goes down, and thirds place bell makes seconds next time. So those 2 bells are affected, which means that the remaining 3 are unaffected. So the green one carries on making seconds as normal, and the 2 bells in 5/6 dodge at the back as normal. So that's just a recap of bobs and singles. Now, how is that useful in terms of conducting? Well, well, it's useful because you can use the same principles. So do you remember last time we were talking about calling yourself in, out, and make, and we use the Isle of Man mnemonic, or the, the baby bio of Bob in, out. Well, you do exactly the same. So one of the very simple things that you can do as a transition from calling Bob doubles to Bob minor is to use the same principles. So you can call yourself in, and then out, and then make. So if we think about, if you're on the second, if you want to call yourself in, that means that there's a call going to be in the first lead, because it's the end of the first lead, because you would have been dodging 3/4 down, so you call yourself in, so it's a bob at the end of the first lead. Now in bob doubles, if you were going to call yourself in, out, make, there's only 3 leads between that and when the next call is, because in a course of bob doubles there's only 4 leads in a whole course. Now in bob minor there's 5 leads in a whole course, because there's 5 working bells. So you would call yourself in, but then if you wanted to, there's 2 ways of doing it. You can basically then count 4 plain leads, so that the 5th lead after that you put a bob in, or you can frankly wait in the circle of work until you get to the right point. So you'd call yourself in, and then next time you do 3/4 down, 5/6 down, 5/6 up, 3/4 up. You get to seconds, I want to call myself out. In goes the bob. And so on, and you would make seconds next time, 3/4 down, 5/6 down, 5/6 up. You're about to come up to 3/4 up. You want right, I want to call myself to make the bob next time. So the bob goes in, and that will be so you'll find that there's 4 plain leads in between each call. So that same principle works, and obviously you can use the bob in, out if that works for you the same. So that's really useful to know that actually if you can call bob doubles, you can also call bob minor using the same principles of in, out, make in, out, make in. Any combination of that will work just the same. Also, when we call bob doubles, and we had another calling position, didn't we, which was an unaffected one, which was the bell making long fifths. Now, same thing applies with bob doubles. You can also call yourself unaffected, which means that you would call yourself in one of the call a bob when you're in one of the 5/6 dodges. So you'd either, this one is here, it's either 5/6 down. So you could call yourself there as a 5/6 down, and then you would repeat that. So every single time you get to 5/6 down, you'd put a bob in. Or you could do it when you're about to dodge 5/6 up. And again, every single time you're about to dodge 5/6 up, you would put a bob in. So you can call yourself unaffected in exactly the same way that the same principles, if you like, of calling yourself unaffected in bob doubles. And you'd need to put the bob in 3 times, because there's, as we learned here, there's 3 bells affected, so you need to rotate them around 3 times for them to get back to their home position. So a bob, to call yourself unaffected in either of the 5/6 dodges 3 times works as well. Now, it's quite important that you remember which 5/6 dodge it is. So you can't do one of 5/6 down and then next time it's the 5/6 up one. You can't do that. You have to pick the same one and stick with it each time. The other thing that you can do, my screen has now gone completely blank. It's totally black. I'm hoping it's going to come back. I'll carry on. I'm going to carry on talking. Can someone tell me that they can still hear me?
Yeah, we can still hear you.
You can still hear me, right? Okay. And are you seeing my screen share?
Yeah, but it's not. It's white.
It's white.
Oh, there it is. Come back now.
That was really scary. I do not know what's going on with my computer. I'm sorry. The other thing that's interesting about calling yourself unaffected is that you can be on any bell and do this. You know, so you can be ringing the second, for example, and so you would have a plain lead for the first one because that's when you're dodging 3/4 down, and then you could have a bob on the next lead, which is when you're dodging 5/6 down. This one here. So you know that and then you'd have 4 plain leads because that's and you get back to the 5th lead after that. You'd put a bob in. So you can do that off any bell. It's usual to have the tenor unaffected because musically it kind of feels a bit more normal and sort of, you know, you apply the same concepts as bob doubles in terms of you can call yourself in, out, make, or you can call yourself unaffected. You can do it off any bell. It's usual to call the tenor unaffected, but you can actually do it off any bell. Any questions with that? No? Okay. Now, the thing about this, it's very good, this approach is very good if you're finding your way with calling. If you don't want to add many bobs in, so if people are sort of, you know, just starting to learn how to ring bobs and things like that. The downside is it takes well, it isn't quite a long time, but it's 3 whole courses. So you know, if you've got a really busy practice night, or you know this concept is where I want to go next. So this is where we start to deviate and move a little bit away in terms of lingo and language from what everything that we've been talking about in terms of bob doubles so far. Now this is probably when we get into the group, this is probably what I'd like for people to practice. This is the starting point. This is a sort of universal touch. It's called wrong home, wrong home. And of course, that's immediately a load of really weird language. It's like, what are you talking about? So let's explain what I'm talking about. So here we've got the blue line on the left-hand side, and it's 6th place bell. So it's where the 6th starts. And as we know, the 6th in bob minor goes down to lead, and its next piece of work is it dodges 5/6 up. Now, a call in that position that, and it's usually abbreviated to a W. These other calling positions or lead ends, if you like, they all have different names, but I'm not going to bother talking about what they are in this talk. But the other one to focus on is the one at the very end of the plain course, which is called a home, and it's abbreviated to H. And that one's a little more obvious to understand because it's when the tenor's got back to its home position and it's about to come round. So there's 2 calling positions, wrong and a home. And what is often done, because you can't, if you were to sort of notate this down and try and describe this to someone else, it really takes up lots of space and lots of effort to try and draw it out as a line. So we start to look at it being notated in a slightly different way, and that's this second column of information. And what happens is you've got obviously 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The one's not put in because we assume that the treble is there. And basically, this is the treble's lead end. So this is the backstroke when the treble's leading. So this is rounds, isn't it? And then each line of numbers is the numbers as they appear at the next lead end, so the treble's backstroke. So this dash here is where we would put a bob in. So what I want for you to start to think about is what happens if we put a bob in a wrong position and then the home position, and then the wrong position and then the home position. So we do wrong, going through here, so carry on the circle of the work, put a bob in at the home, which is at the end of the course, and then we repeat it. So we're starting here and we put in a bob at the next lead, which is the wrong position, carry on through the circle of work, and then put a home in at the end. And I want to invite you to have a think about that as a new option. So we've got rounds. A bob, it's that dash at the end of the next lead, produces the bell order 2, 3, 5, 6, 4, and it writes it out there to be helpful. It thinks it's helpful for us to know that. And then often these things are notated with the order of the bells at the end of the next lead. So that's the order at the end of the next lead. No dash because it's a plain lead. Because by this point the tenor is dodging 3, 4 up, and we're not putting a bob in there because it's not a wrong or a home. So that's that one, and then it repeats. It carries on telling us the information of the bell order, each lead end, and then we get to this one, which is a home, because it's the 5th lead later. There's a dash, there's a bob, and it very helpfully tells us the bell order. And then it's got a line because that marks the course end. And then it starts again. The next lead, so we've gone from a home position here. The next lead is we're in the wrong calling position and we know we want to put a bob in there. So we put, it's got a little dash and it tells us what the bell order is going to be. And then there's 1, 2, 3 plain leads, and then there's a bob again. And then we notice that the bell order has got back to rounds. So this, I'd like to invite you to try practicing this as your first main touch. So basically, if you're in this one, the way it's written out, if you're ringing the 6th, you're basically putting a bob in every single time you're dodging 5, 6, whether it's up or down. And the first one you come across is a bob up. So is the bob in the first lead. And then you're in 3, 4, no bob, seconds, no bob, 3, 4, no bob. Then you come to your 5, 6 dodge again, which is actually back to your home position, and you put a bob in. So a nice, easy way of remembering that, and it works off any bell, but it's more usual to do it off the tenor, is when you're in, every single time you do a 5, 6 dodge, you put a bob in. And the way it's written is it's called wrong home, or wrong home, wrong home. And this that I want to show here, this I'm just picking out what happens with the other bells. It's just do I even look at it when I'm looking? I don't think I even do, if I'm honest with you, but sometimes it writes it out like this. It's just helpful sometimes to what it tells you is the second is back in second's place, the third is in third's place. So that tells you for the second to have to get back to second's place at the end of the first lead, it is running in. For the third to get to the third's place, that bob on the backstroke, it has to have run out. And the 5th is the one that's making it. And then it just helps you sort of notice what happens with other bells. And indeed, if you don't want to ring the tenor, if you wanted to ring the 5th instead, it tells you, oh right, if I want to put a wrong in, then actually the 5th will be making the bob the first time in the first call, and then it will be running out for the next 2 calls. For the home it runs out, for the wrong it runs out, and then I'm on the 5th, I'm back to my back to dodging 5, 6 up, which is actually the home position. 5, 6 are back together. So it's kind of a little bit useful if you've got these numbers out and you don't want to ring the tenor, and it sort of helps you look up, well, what am I going to be doing if I want to still call the tenor wrong home, wrong home. Now the language wrong home, sometimes I hear if you wanted to call the second with a bob on 5-6 down, 5-6 up, 5-6 down, 5-6 up. So basically the same sort of pattern. Would you actually say it's the second ringing wrong home? Some people do, and I have to say I find it quite confusing. So I tend to stick with this language of wrong home relating purely to the tenor. So the home position is when the tenor comes back at the end of the course, and it's a sort of universally accepted thing that's the home position. So if you were going to call the second 5-6 down, 5-6 up, 5-6 down, 5-6 up, I probably wouldn't use that language of wrong home. Some people do, but I find it quite confusing. Anyone got any questions with that? So on the surface of it, relatively easy to call. Every single time when you're in 5-6, you put a bob in. You can do it off any bell. It's more usual to do it when the sixth is doing it, just because the music sounds more what we're used to. But it does actually work off any bell. And all of a sudden, we've started to introduce these calling positions, which have names. And the most common ones are wrong and home. And that's what they relate to. And the concept of wrong and home applies to loads of other methods. So the home position in Cambridge Royal is when the 10th, the tenor, it's become tenths place spell. It's the same home position. And the wrong position is when the 10th has become the next one down from the back, which in this place is ninths place bell. And so it's also called a wrong. It's the position when the tenor in however many bells you're ringing is either in its home position or it's sort of n-1, its next one down position. So it becomes a universal language that I'm starting to introduce you to here. Okay. So sometimes the notation is written even slightly differently from that. So we had a look at this, didn't we, where it writes out each lead. That's useful because it helps you see what all the bells are doing. But it also takes up quite a lot of space, especially if you're writing out a peal or quarter peal. So sometimes it's notated differently. And it's actually notated like this. More usually it's notated like this. So if you look in, I don't know, those composition Long Ridge books and, the ringing, the diary and things like that, it's notated like this. And all it does is it's a slightly shorthand version of it. So it has the calling positions here. So it's got wrong and it's got home, and then it's got the numbers of how the bells sound. And basically there's a dash, so it's basically saying there's a dash, so you work left to right. So you call a bob for the wrong, you call a bob for the home, and at the end of that first course the order will be 1 4 5 2 3 6. So 1 4 5 2 3 6, we can see that. And then you go from the home and then you sort of go down like reading a book, go down to the next line. Oh, there's a dash under the wrong, right, I need to put a wrong in. There's a dash under the home, right, I need to put a home in. And then it tells you the bell order at the end of that sequence of bobs, which is, as we know, 1 2 3 4 5 6, and because we know that from here. So when you start to look up compositions or things to call, you most often will notice it like this. And this is how to interpret it. You read it left to right. Every time there's a dash, it means there's a bob. And if for example it said there was a dash under W and then nothing under H, it means you don't put the home in. So you just have wrong and then wrong and home, for example. So you'd have a bob in the first lead, and then you'd wait the whole lead, a whole course, and then the next time you get to the wrong position, you'd put a bob in and then a home, if for example that first home wasn't there. So that's how it's notated. And when you look at that, that's what on earth it means. And then sometimes it's notated even more shorthand. So this I ripped off CompLib, as many of you beginning to pick up. I quite like CompLib, and basically this is how it's written on CompLib. It's even more summarized. Same touch. So what it's same principles. It's got the numbers and you read it left to right. So it's got wrong. There's a dash there under home, and then it says 2-part. So it basically means repeat it. So rather than bothering to write it out again on the next line, it basically just saves a line. It says you call it wrong home, and because it's a 2-part, you do it again, wrong home. So that's even more simplified. And that is how it appears on CompLib. But this is more like how it appears in the diary and that sort of thing. Any questions with that? Okay. So let's talk about singles. So singles are probably, unless you started learning Grantzer first, singles are probably what, first time you come across them when you get to Bob Minor. So just a little recap. This is what we talked about with a single. Only 2 bells affected. In a bob, as we know, there's 3 bells affected, but in a single, it's just 2 bells, and it's the bells that are in 3rd and 4th place. Now, because there's 2 bells affected, the very simplest thing to do is to call a single when 2 bells get together. And then when those same 2 bells get together again, you call another single. So basically you swap them and then you swap them back. And that's the very simplest thing to do with singles. So 120, which is 2 courses, what you would call is you could call 2 singles in the same place in each course. So the first course, you put a single in wherever the hell you like. It doesn't matter. Any of the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or 5th lead. It's usual to do it in the 5th lead because the tenors are back at home and it sounds nicer. So you could, put it in any lead. It's usual to do it in the 5th lead. And then you go all the way through again. And when you get to the 5th lead in the next course, you put another single in and it swaps them back. And that's a really nice, simple way of, something to do. Now, if you put it in on the 5th lead, so tenors are back together. So we've got 5, 6 dodging together. We've got the 2nd about to make seconds. So it's the 3rd and the 4th get swapped over. So you end up with the row at the end would be 1, 2, 4, 3, 5, 6. And then you go through another whole course, put a single in, and you'd end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's a really nice thing to do. And if you've got anybody who's learning to do singles, that's a very nice, easy way to get them. You shove them on the 3rd or the 4th, and then you put a single in. But basically, any time in any lead in the course, you can do it on. Like I say, it's usually to do it on the 5th lead because the tenors, it sounds right. Now, the useful thing about this is that you can use a single to basically double the length of anything, because you're swapping 2 bells over. So you can call something, then when you get to the end of it, put a single in, it swaps 2 bells over, and then you carry on all again. You double the length of it, put another single in, and it swaps them back. So you've got a nice, easy way of doubling the length of something. So if we have a look at our wrong home that we were talking about, it's at 120. So 2 courses. So we've got, what we can do instead is, rather than the 2nd home, rather than calling it as a bob and it comes round, we can put a single in. So we do wrong, home, and it produces that order which we know, wrong, and then home. And then you can see it goes 1, 2, 4, 3, 5, 6. And then what you do is you repeat it. So you go wrong, home, single home, wrong, single home. And the 2nd single home, once it's repeated, will swap that 3 and 4 back and it comes into rounds. So 2 singles in exactly the same place doubles the composition. So if we think right back up to, I'm going to go back up to it. This one, when we call ourselves unaffected. So let's say we were going to call ourselves, but when we dodge 5, 6 down, we could do first one a bob. We do it 3 times, don't we? Because it's 3 courses. First one a bob, second one a bob, third one we could do as a single, and it will swap 2 bells over, and then we repeat it. So the fourth one's a bob, the fifth one's a bob, and the sixth one's a single, and it swaps that pair back. So all of a sudden you've got 6 courses. So if you, I don't know, you're ringing for a wedding or something, and you need to fill up 15 minutes, that's a really nice, easy way of doing it. And it doesn't have to be the third call. It could be the first call or the second one. So long as you do it in exactly the same pattern, it sort of doubles the length, and that's the value of singles, amongst other things, is it enables us to double the length, because it as we swap a pair and then swap them back. Any questions on singles? You've probably got a million questions on singles. I find them very confusing and things, but as an introduction to their value and as a place to start, 2 singles, basically try putting it in as it's about to come round. So at the end of the first course, and then try it again, and you'll find, oh, I've caught a touch. Now, some other shorter touches. You'll see here we've got some stuff that we recognize. So we're starting to see that the lead end order is written out, and we've seen that approach before. But rather than it talking about wrongs and homes and things, it's just got B's and S's. So often we can see shorter touches notated this way. When they're notated this way, you know that you're starting to count the number of leads as opposed to looking for wrongs and homes and calling positions. So in this one, for example, there's an S at the end of the first row after the rounds. So that basically means you put a single in at the end of the first lead. The next lead hasn't got anything, it's blank, so it's a plain lead. Then a single at the end of the third lead. The fourth lead has nothing, so it's a plain lead. The fifth lead is an S, and so on and so on. And so basically you end up with a pattern. If you go single, plain, single, plain, single, plain, single, plain, it comes round. So these shorter touches sometimes are notated this way, and there's just loads of them. You can probably go plain, single, plain, single, plain, single, plain, single, and rotate them that way. Here's another one: bob, bob, plain, bob, bob, plain, bob, bob, plain. And again, I think you can rotate those around. It's a pattern of 3, so bob, bob, plain, so you can rotate them around in any order. And then you've got a 120 here, plain bob, plain bob, plain bob, plain bob. That's nice and easy. And we did that, didn't we, in plain bob doubles, because that created the 60. If you remember, we did that of just looking at. We noticed in the 60 was bob, plain, bob, plain, bob, plain, or the other way around. And here it is, the same concept in bob minor as well. And you can start to shove other bits of patterns in. Here's another pattern: plain bob single, plain bob plain, plain bob single, plain bob plain. So, and you can go on to many resources and just look up lots of different variations of this sort of thing. So 120 is 2 courses, 180 is 3 courses. So it's you'd be able to work out roughly how long that would take. And so on. So the reason for this slide is I want to basically say, how on earth do you remember? How do you approach it? What's the right way of doing all of this, Julia? And actually there is no real right way, but what we've noticed is there's 5 different ways that I've been referring to calling things. So the first way is to just basically learn the number of leads between the calls. So there might be a call in the first lead, then a call in the fourth lead after that, and then the next lead after that, and then the fourth lead after that. So one way of doing it is just to literally count the number of leads between calls. Another way of doing it, that's quite hard work, because you've got really not much orientation of, you know, what's happening. I would be quite cautious of that approach, but it is an approach. A second way of doing it is to learn a repeating pattern. So literally you just go and look something up or take something away from here and just learn a repeating pattern, and you just sort of, you know, plain bob, or bob, plain bob, plain, whatever, and that happens a number of times. Another way that you can do it is by learning the pattern relative to your own bell. So this is the in, out, make in, make in, out approach that we've talked about. Or you know, calling yourself 3 times 5, 6 up, for example. Another way that we've talked about is to learn the pattern relative to another bell. So you might be doing your thing, but you're watching you know, the 6th when it gets to its home position, and you're putting a bob in there. And we talked about that quite a lot, didn't we, in bob doubles, when we were saying who's the observation bell, who's the bell that's making long fifths. Even if you're not it, who is that bell? Because you can watch that bell as well. That's quite useful to have an extra security blanket about knowing what other people are doing. And all of those 1 to 4 are stuff that we've been referring to in bob doubles, and they apply in the same way in bob minor. And then this, number 5, is a new concept which applies to bob minor. We don't really talk about it in bob doubles, and that's to learn where the calls are relative to fixed calling positions. And the most common ones are wrong and home, wrong, and single home, repeated. We looked at that one, didn't we, for example? So does anyone want to have a guess at what that one is? Bob in the first lead, and then 4 leads later there's a bob, and then 1 lead later there's a bob, and then 4 leads later there's a bob. What is that? Does anyone want to tell me, or put it in the chat box, or unmute and tell me what that might be relative if we were to give it calling position language? So bob at the end of the first lead, the tenor will be dodging 5, 6 up. Does that have a calling position that we know? It's a wrong. So that's a wrong. And then 4 leads later, 5 leads in a plain course. So we know that the tenor, 4 leads after that, the tenor's got back to 5, 6 down. So that actually is another way of thinking about that, is a home, which is this down here, wrong, home, and so on. Which of these do you use? I don't care. It really is up to you, whatever works to you. What I will say is, if you're at all serious about conducting and want to sort of progress at all, you do need to start getting used to this wrong home blah-de-blah lingo, and being able to know, read and interpret the you know, those diagrams that I said. But all of these, all of these, you know, calling yourself in, out, make is an absolutely valid way of doing things, and it, you know, and it absolutely works, and that's totally fine. So yeah, there's no right and wrong in any of these, but I will say, if you're at all serious, you do need to start getting used to this wrong home, calling yourself home 3 times, for example, or wrong home, as an approach. So that's what I wanted to cover. Those are going to go into the bob minor calling. I suggest what we do, just because, oh God, there, I suggest we have a go at this one, wrong home, first of all, because it's 2 courses long, so it's a decent length without being too long. And people can try and start to do that, and you can do it by off any bell, or you can try it off the 6th, or you can be ringing any bell and watch the 6th if you're feeling quite brave about doing it that way. So I suggest that this is a nice starting point, although, you know, it is worth remembering that it's arguably even easier to call yourself either unaffected or in outmake. It's just that it takes quite a bit longer and we don't have that much time if we've got a number of people to get through. So that's my suggestion. So any comments or questions before we go into the breakout room? How much of that made any sense?
All of it.
All of it. Okay, good. And interesting that there's quite a lot of parallels to the bob doubles, isn't there? You know, you can actually use the same principles from the bob doubles in bob minor. That's quite useful. You know, it's not a completely different world. I'm trying to stop sharing and it seems to have crashed as well. I'm struggling today.